Well, welcome everybody to this Social Church Live. Also, kind of weaving in here, Church Marketing University and the Church Marketers Group. I'm really excited to be talking with Zac today. And Zac, I'm really excited to pick your brain when it comes to volunteers. I know every church that I've ever been a part of is always saying, wait, we need volunteers. How in the world do we get more volunteers? And we're going to jump into that here in a second. And I love your thinking on this. And it seems like we're in a lot of different church groups together. And I think anytime this conversation came up, I would see your comments. I'd be like, oh, wow, this guy really knows his stuff. And I know Adam McLaughlin and I were doing a couple interviews, and you were talking with us on that as well. I was like, man, we need to get Zac on to share his stuff. So finally, the day is here, man.
Yeah, it's fun.
This is going to be exciting. So before we jump into all the strategy and the systems and the processes, why don't you catch us up to speed and kind of what part of the world you're in and a little bit about your journey. And I want to say this too, for those of you guys jumping on, let us know as well, because I'd love to know what part of the country that you're in, and then what type of church. Are you in a church plant? Are you in an established church? Because I think as we kind of come out of this conversation, a lot of our kind of stories shape the context and how we recruit volunteers and train and develop volunteers. But Zac, why don't you kick us off by kind of giving us your story and your journey over the last few years here?
Yeah, so I pastored a church down in Arkansas, and there were some people that asked us to come up and financially support some church plants in the Northwest. And so we came, and our church was doing a lot, and it was fun. But then God broke my heart for the Northwest. And when I went back, I told our elders at our church, and I love to joke around, and I told them, I said, hey, instead of sending money, why don't you send your preacher, because everybody talks about their preacher, right? And so they were like, no, but after a lot of prayer and tears, my wife and I, we quit our jobs. I was an electrician at Arkansas State University for 10 years. My wife managed 2 hospital clinics. We were in our 20s, made over 6 figures. And then the model that we went to go start with was, let's just go out there and start churches with a guy by the name of Stephen Ward. And our model was, we're going to not get paid from the church so that the church can do all the ministry. And we're going to pray for people to send money financially for us as missionaries. And 4 years later, we're here and never missed a paycheck. It's pretty crazy.
Wow, dude, that is incredible. And I love that journey. And I know you guys have a kind of a unique model. But what's cool is, because you said you went out there in about 2014, and now you're not only planting one church, but you're starting multiple locations, churches. So walk us through kind of that journey over the last few years. What does that look like?
Yeah, so one of the things that God did was place Stephen Ward in my life, and he had this vision to not just start a church, but start a church planting network. And so when we moved out, we were meeting in the convention center in Spokane, Washington, the original Pinnacle church. But then we went to Eastern Washington University, started a church there 15 miles away. And then from there, a church, they heard we were doing a good job, and they called some people in this denomination, and they said, hey, we don't want our church to die. And can somebody come and help our church restart? And so next thing we know, we went from there to Spokane Valley, Washington. And this church gave us their building, gave us everything. And then we started this location, which is now called Pinnacle Church, Dishman Hills. And then the same thing happened about that same time in 9 Mile, Washington, and this church shut down, gave us their building and all that, and we're just continuing to go. And within 2 years of Pinnacle Church, Dishman Hills, it's our goal not just to have a lot of people, but to go and plant churches. So there was a guy that we led to Jesus, and we put him in ministry. That was his calling, and he's just in 2 years, he left to go start a church in Detroit.
Cool. So, I mean, that's the whole idea, right? You guys are starting to multiply, and
Yeah.
it sounds like you currently have 4 locations, if my math is okay, this morning. And I think that's a really important concept for a lot of pastors and church leaders jumping on this, listening. Is part of your DNA is this idea of multiplication, and that is true from the top. The vision, the how you approach locations and churches and planning, but it's also true that you'll see this as we talk about volunteers, right? And I don't want to get into all the strategy just yet, but is that kind of the idea that the idea of multiplication is woven into your DNA?
Yeah, and it is. And even though we've started these different things, we have given church plants away because it's not about us. And you can imagine talking with some of your supporters when we have a couple $100,000 that are given from outside supporters and telling them, hey, we gave a church plant away, and we're like excited and they're so confused.
Yeah. Dude, that's so cool. I want also too now to jump into a little bit of the story of how your church approaches volunteers. Again, because I think when we get into strategy and tactics at the backside of this interview, it's important for people to understand your context. I know every church is going to approach this differently, but it seems like you guys really use this idea of multiplication, volunteers as a part of even maybe outreach, evangelism, discipleship, multiplication strategy. So walk us through maybe some of the stories you were telling me even before we went live, some of these stories about how that all plays out at your church in your context.
Yeah, so we knew if we were going to really make an impact, it couldn't just be with paid staff, right? And all of our locations, not one person gets paid through the church. We're supported by different people as missionaries, or we are co-vocational, and so that's somebody working and then also being involved in the church. And so we knew we needed to get a lot of volunteers, and we knew that we needed to figure out to help people find purpose, because if people find purpose, they will have passion. And a lot of people, when it comes to volunteering in the church, they're like, oh, I don't want to volunteer. And some of the issue is we're trying to fit people in a position that they're not supposed to be in. So we just have it open hand and say, hey, whatever you want to do, like try it out for a couple months, and if that's not it, like try something else. And so that's kind of what we do is somebody will come, we'll do a block party, somebody will come to there will be a relational connection, and then we just try to figure out and tell them, hey, we're starting a church, do you want to help? Now, a lot of these people don't believe like I do, right?
Yeah.
They don't believe like I do, but that's okay. We've seen people come to faith by allowing them to volunteer.
Yeah, so your guys' philosophy would be, hey, we're starting a church, and why don't you guys come be a part of it? And then you go on that journey together. So they may be volunteering, but they may not have the same belief system that you guys do yet. But you're saying, hey, this is a discipleship opportunity. We're going on this adventure together, which is why I ask a lot of our viewers to kind of put in the type of church you are and where you're coming from. Because I think and a lot of people are saying, hey, we're more of an established church. We got one here that loves the beard, the epic beard. But I think to a lot of established churches, that's a little bit scary, right? Because the traditional church model is, hey, get them saved, get them sanctified, get them, and then we'll talk about, volunteering type deals. So maybe tell the story about, you were telling me the story even about your drummer, but tell us a little bit how that actually plays out.
Yeah, so the guy that says my beard is epic, man, I was just in Arkansas, Tennessee for 7 days speaking engagements to raise support. And I know places like Arkansas, if you take our model, they would crucify you, like you would be the next Jesus, right? But what we've done, we didn't know anybody. And here we are trying to start this thing. And so we were just praying, and we went out on a limb, and we were like, all right, if we start a church, this is what the box that we should start in, and it included a full band. Well, we had several different positions, but we didn't have a drummer. So what we did was we put an ad out on Craigslist and told people we're going to have a jam session. And that was just people coming, and we were going to have pizza, and then we did all this on Facebook and Craigslist. And there were people that came, and it was cool. And then we told them, all right, we're going to start a church. Do you want to help us? And everybody said no, except for one person. And this person, his name is Phil. And Phil's, at the time, wasn't a follower of Jesus. But we just say these three things. We just desire to be a place where people can explore faith, experience community, and expand mission. And so with that, our worship leader, he started pouring in worship practice before we started, pouring his life and these beliefs into our drummer. And then we scheduled, you always have to dream big, right?
Yeah.
You always have to dream
real
big.
quick, Zach, was the drummer, was Phil at the time homeless?
Yeah.
Did I catch that right? So at the time, he was homeless. He came to a jam session from a Craigslist ad, and you're saying, hey, we're starting a church. And he's like, hey, I play the drums. And you're like, let's go on this journey, because one of your core values is we're going to explore faith. But you're also going on this journey of we're also multiplying. So now those two are meeting together, right? Now, so keep going on the story.
And going back, Phil, there were some major tensions. And if you think about it, discipleship is just a little messy. Right?
Yeah.
Like some people, whenever there's issues, they step away, but we didn't have any choice. So when it came to Phil being homeless, what would happen is we would leave the jam sessions or worship practices after we did the jam session, that he came. But then people would see him on the side of the street, like holding signs, right? Like begging for money. And there were major tensions there with our team. And so it was like, all right, well, we're told to love people. We can't expect them to behave before they believe. So we need to let them belong before they believe, then believe before they behave. And so, man, Phil, we dreamed big. In our a month after we started, we had a baptism service that we planned. And when we planned it and when we launched, we didn't have one person to be baptized, but we were already like planning this, right? But then that baptism service came, and Phil, he prayed to receive Christ, and he's now a follower of Jesus.
Wow, dude. So cool. And you guys are a few years in. And is Phil still drumming?
Hey, he's drumming all the time. And not only is he drumming, he is taking a young teenager and teaching him how to drum, because that's part of the multiplication process. Yeah. And he's got it in his mind. Hey, I'm going to train him just enough, maybe just for one set of songs where he can play on Sunday and I'm in the crowd. And that's where real multiplication happens. It's not doers, but it's multipliers.
Yeah, I love it, man. I wanted to make sure we took time out to start with your story, your context, because I want people to understand that as we now jump into this more strategy and tactics and ideas, so they understand the world in which you're coming from, the core values that you guys are trying to live out, the even cultural context of you're going into a culture that is not a Christian culture. Yeah. And you're like, where do we start? How do we do this? How do we make disciples? How do we live this out? So I think as we get into the tactics, that understanding of your context is really, really important. And I think for those of you listening, I would encourage you to think through, some of you guys that are in a more established, maybe you're more in the Midwest like I am, maybe you're going to be like, how do we move more a little bit that direction to take on some of this flavor of being a little bit more aggressive when it comes to multiplication, taking risks, going on a little bit more of a messy journey that is a little bit outside your box, and like, okay, we're going to move that way, because I think the church world in general needs to go that way. That's just my take. So as you guys are listening, understand that context. But now let's jump over into kind of the tactics. And what I want to pick your brain on, and we're getting some good questions, and if you guys have questions, throw them in there. We're going to circle back around. Jonathan, I saw your question, and we're going to circle back around. So be loading up the questions as well. We'll do that at the end of the interview. But I want to ask your question, Zac. The next one is, what is the key to the long-term solution when it comes to volunteers? Because I think there's a lot of conversation around ideas and tactics and strategies, and man, we need 3 people immediately. How do we go get those 3 people? But then you find yourself a month later, it's the same emergency. And so I want to shift the conversation of, what do we need to do in our churches so we're working towards a long-term solution of this, not just a short-term Band-Aid? So what thoughts would you have that would kind of help church leaders think, could we build a system? Could we build a process? Could we build something that is helping us long-term solve this and not just a short-term Band-Aid? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we all have that urge to have this need. Then it's like, oh, we have this need. Let's figure this out. And we have that. There's that tension, and we just share with our people. We want you to use your God-given potential, whatever it looks like. If we have 5 people doing that, man, maybe you still get in there and don't serve on a needs-based system, right? Like, try to find that out, because if we put people in positions that they're not gifted in, or maybe they just thought they were gifted in, and then they found out they weren't, what would happen is there's going to be major frustration, and it's not going to be long till they leave your church.
Yeah. So how do you practically do that? Like how do you set up a leadership system in which that type of culture is being developed? So you have people, I'm assuming, who are going on a journey with people and trying to figure out their gifts, right? And get them into the right roles. How do you do that so that is multiplying in your context?
Yeah. So with us and what we do is we ask some of our core people, the people who are all in, and that's that's not a lot, right? In any of our locations, that's not a lot. We have a lot of fringe people in our context. I don't know why the Lord has just given us a lot of people who've never been to church,
Love it.
So it's a little crazy, but anybody that's all in, we're asking them, hey, whatever it takes, if there's a need, you do that. Like you're all in. But then there's that other level of the people that aren't all in, and we're trying to find them some of the things to do. Like I saw Stephen Kirk, he's our one of our associate pastors here at Dishman Hills, and he said Zac cleans the bathroom too. So I do, and when I do that, I take a picture, send it to my one of my old seminary professors, and I said, "You didn't teach me this." But what we do is lead by example. If I want people to serve and to use their gifting, they need to see me do that.
Yeah.
Like I'll never forget, there was this time I was weed eating out by the road, and this guy came by. It was when our church really started to grow, and he came by and he yelled, and I thought he yelled my name, and I stopped, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm weed eating." And he said, "I didn't know preachers did that." Right? And so we just do whatever it takes, but then try to find people in that gifting to get them in that. But you just don't need doers, right?
Yeah.
We need doers to do some of those things, but we need people to be able to see. We need to gather people to train them up and then to send them out, not just in our location, but a lot of times with volunteers, and I know it's just not in the Northwest, I know it was the same in Arkansas, was people just got burnt out, right? And so what we've done, every time we launched a location, and this was ingrained in Stephen Ward, one of my really good friends that helps us, and he actually started this whole monster of a thing. But he started with 2 services, and every time we launch a location, we start with 2 services where people can attend a service and then serve a service.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I think we noticed that at Summit Park Church. Whenever you get to those two service marks and do as much as you can to get there because of that ability to do that, where people can rotate, that makes a really, really big difference. And I know, just side note, in our context, we were even struggling that when we launched Saturday night. You try to launch two services so that you can keep that same part of your DNA. So I know there's probably a lot of church leaders that wrestle with that as well. So it sounds like part of what you guys do is you just build into your culture and who you are this idea of multiplication, leading by example, discipleship, being okay with the messiness of life, going on a journey. So there's that whole kind of freedom to explore and get people plugged in the gifts. But I also know from reading the article in your materials and seeing your stuff that there's a system and processes underneath that, right?
Yeah,
so you've got all this freedom on one hand, but it's not just haphazard. There's stuff going on that actually is very systematic and is very process driven. So why don't you walk us through what does some of your systems look like that is helping you support kind of this freedom to disciple and go on a journey?
Yeah. So again, just those three things: explore faith, experience community, expand mission. And so if we can do it together, then we can multiply that, right? And God didn't mean for us to do life in isolation, meant us to do it together. And it's not just on Sunday, but all through the week. And so we baptized this girl a couple weeks ago, and she hadn't been to church in a long time. But what it was my wife was following up with her. Her name was Michaela. And Nicole asked her, well, what do you like about Pinnacle? And she said, well, y'all aren't very professional, right? And so my wife at first, she was like, am I offended? Am I not offended? Like, what is this? But that was that community aspect, and she had never seen that. And all of our people, we just desire to be real. And so when she heard like me on stage or some of our other people sharing failures they've had in their life, she didn't know people did that because she considered that like weaknesses, but we're made strong when we're weak, right?
Yeah.
And so what we do is we have this underlying thing of, all right, this is what we want: experience community, explore faith, expand mission. But then also let's teach people to try not to serve alone. Let's teach people to work themselves out of a job. For our small group leaders, and even for me, we want to have the best small group, right? But it's our goal to create small group leaders better than us. Wow. Let's do it better. And when we send churches out, I'm going to tell you, when we sent Austin out to go start a church in Detroit, him and his wife were some of the best workers. And we baptized all of them. Him, his wife, his two kids, and like whole life change, right? But we needed to send the best out so that one would be really good.
Yeah. Yeah, man, good stuff. And so what I keep hearing you come back to is this idea that everything you do, the idea that multiplication permeates everything. So if you're going to lead a small group, the goal is not, hey, let's lead a small group. The goal is let's lead a small group that multiplies. Yeah. Let's lead a small group that is developing up leaders to lead another small group. The goal is if you're going to volunteer, you don't volunteer in isolation. You volunteer in order to multiply. Yeah. And if you're a church, you don't exist as a church just to be a great church. You exist as a church to multiply into other churches. So when we say multiplication is a part of your DNA, that is at every single level, from discipleship, small groups, leadership, volunteer, and even churches. Am I missing something, or is that somewhat of the angle that you guys are going at it?
No, that is. And I'm not saying we do everything perfectly, because we don't at all. And we've messed up in things, but what we always desire is for somebody to have somebody with them. So like for our small group, one of the ways that we get people involved is like we write our own small group stuff, and it goes with a sermon and everything. But a lot of people think, oh, that's really sexy, right? They're like, oh, that's cool. But the issue we don't tell them is the only reason why we started writing our small group curriculum is because we couldn't afford any other curriculum, right? And so people think we're cool, and we're like, we're broke, so we're going to do this. But somebody, for example, a couple weeks ago, last year, there was this guy that came. His name was Phoenix. He's kind of had a church background, a little sketchy about ideas and thinking. So we got to pour into Phoenix. And a couple weeks ago, I noticed that he was writing a lot. And I said, hey, Phoenix, would you want to write small group curriculum? Now, at this point, he hadn't even attended a small group. And so what I did, I went with him, I sat down with him, and then we walked through what that was like. And I wrote 3/4 of the small group curriculum, and he saw the process, and then he went home and just done the rest of it. And so then what that did, that got him in small group, and now he's got with our small group director, and they're already gave him more stuff to write, And so there's things like that we always try to do.
Yeah, and I keep hearing you say, like, we teach them, or where are you practically, what does that look like? Like when you're training your volunteers, do you guys have a volunteer training meeting? Do you do this online? Because I hear you say we're teaching people a lot, or maybe you're developing up these pastors that you're sending out. Where is that practically happening?
Yeah, so sometimes we'll have a meeting right after church in one of our locations. Okay. But then some of it is, since we have things on paper, it's a lot of one-on-one, or maybe 1-on-5, just getting a smaller group together, because we desire that community aspect, right? So if it's just a video, and I know this isn't practical for everybody, especially the size of your church, but we want that community aspect where it's one-on-one, where they could ask questions. We used to do videos for different things than just send out DVDs and all that, but that just messed up some of that community aspect. So we had to take steps back so that we could go forward better, right?
Gotcha. There's 2 diagrams. So you got an article on your blog, and we also published a version of that on Church Marketing University that just went live today. There's 2 diagrams on that article, and if you guys are watching, we'll post a link here after the interview that you can go check this out. One of the diagrams is your leadership flow. So the idea that it starts with kind of this zigzag back and forth. And I wish I could share my screen, but is there anything that you would want to communicate out of that leadership flow process that has been really important for you guys as you're developing volunteers with all your church plants and your church planting networks? Yeah,
so what we do is try to do a event, whether it be just something at your house. If it's a UFC fight, right? Okay. If it's that, or a block party at the church or something.
So some sort of outreach event is the starting point.
And then what we'll do is we have people who are roamers that will just roam around, not necessarily the doers doing all the stuff. We need those people too. But we also have roamers that find this relational connection. They talk with them and things. I mean, Dale Carnegie wrote a lot of stuff about that, right?
Yeah.
Remember Dale Carnegie? Yeah. And then what they do is after they come to an event, we'll find out on the connection cards who kind of met with who, and then we'll kind of connect them with that person since they already have that community aspect. And then what they'll do, they'll invite them to come to church with them, say, hey, why don't you come to church with me? I'll meet you right outside. We've even sent out graphics after events for people to invite somebody to come to church. Cool. And then from there, at that Sunday experience, what we do is ask people to tell them, the people that came to this event, hey, why don't you come to small group with me? Okay. Right? And you don't have to bring anything. It's just going to be a meal. We're going to have a meal, but then we're going to go through that same passage that we talked about on Sunday. And then from the small group aspect, it's asking them maybe a week or two after that, hey, do you want to come and serve with me on Sunday? Do you want to help? You can come do this. And so what we have is several people, their salvation story started with serving and not being followers of Jesus.
Gotcha. So just to walk through that again, starts with an outreach event.
Yep.
Then and you guys can see this on the blog and the article. Then it goes to a relational connection, which then that relationship connection goes to kind of getting to know them. And then that person invites them to join them on a Sunday experience. Then they invite them to come, hey, why don't you come hang out with us at our small group? And then a couple weeks later, it's a, hey, do you want to serve alongside me? And then at the end of it, it says multiply, right? Yeah. So this whole idea is, and this is what I love, is that you're empowering your people. And again, great biblical concept here, right? You're empowering your people for the work of the ministry to go, and you're setting the process, right? You've kind of said, hey, here's how we're going to facilitate this all to happen. So that goes back to that. There is a system and there's a process, but there's this very much this freedom for your people to go on these journeys with people through your process and bring them along, but it's very intentional. Yeah. So everybody who is serving and volunteering is also going through these relational deals where they're inviting people to serve alongside them as well. Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah, I love it.
That's dead on. And as I'll just tell you, high quality leaders, we get called micromanagers a lot, right? And we want things this certain way. And I'll walk into some place on Sunday. I'm doing something. I even have a job on Sunday. I make coffee or something like that,
Yeah.
Something where any crazy person could do. So that's what I do. But then I'll walk in somewhere and I'm like, how come music isn't going? Right? The coffee things upstairs don't go like that. They need to go in their spots. It's got little name tags. Like, can we not get that right? But then I gotta realize, and all of us as leaders need to realize, we're only talking about an hour on Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not really that big of a deal if things are swapped or if the music's not hitting the right level that we want it to, and you can't feel the bass enough or something, maybe, the person doing the lights, they got it the wrong color. It should be blue right now. It's on that sheet that says, here it is, 905 blue, right? But you just can't get frustrated at that. And it's teaching people, let them train others. Like 2 Timothy 2:2 talks about train men who go and do the same. And so, not saying we do that perfectly, because we do have some people, and I know they don't mind me saying it, but they're like, this is my job, and I'm not giving it to anybody, and I'm going to be here every Sunday, right?
Sure.
But you just got to relationally walk through that and let them know, man, it's not about us. It's about multiplying.
Yeah, and this would be maybe the hard truth to sink in is churches, if we've gotten really, really, really professional and good at the 1 hour, right, that people are in our location, but we've failed to get good at the multiplication and discipleship with every other hour, then maybe we need to go back and reevaluate. Are we missing the really key important part, right? Are we missing the most important part of relationship, outreach, multiplication, discipleship, at the expense of having a perfect 1 hour experience, which I just like probably a lot of people, I enjoy when it's a great experience. But if we're failing at, the other 98% of ministry, that we might need to take a time out. So man, that's good stuff. And sometimes it's hard, especially for the perfectionists among us, to be like, no, the coffee labels, the music, the decibels, the lights. We gotta have it perfect. And I think a lot of church leaders grew up in the area of church excellence. So some of that grades against maybe what's been beat into us in church and ministry conference for a long time. But I love this idea of just challenging, man, is the main thing really more multiplication than it is production excellence. So man, that's a good stuff. That's a challenging word and a good word. And I love this idea too of everybody needs to be going on this journey with somebody else, or maybe you're not really on the journey. And so maybe that's a good action step that, for those of us watching this video or watching the replay, that we love action steps. Maybe the action step is looking at our ministry volunteers and leaders and be like, how many of them are actually bringing somebody along? How many of them are engaged in some level of multiplication? And if we come back and we say, you know what, it's basically 90 to 100% of our people are doing ministry without multiplying themselves, then we need to go back to the drawing board. And my question to you, Zac, would be, what would you do if a church pastor came to you and be like, honestly, we took an evaluation and we've got a lot of good volunteers, but 100% of them aren't multiplying themselves. Nobody is saying, hey, come and watch me do it, or come and do a journey. What would be your encouragement to that church leader to start turning that ship around so that next year, this time, they could be like, you know what, we've made strides. Now half of our people are going on some sort of multiplication journey. What would be your advice to them?
So I know right now, when I watch videos and things, I'm always like, all right, how do I put this in my context? And so what a lot of people don't know, they hear, oh, we multiply and all this, and yes, but all of our locations are less than 150 people. And just, you don't have to have that many people, to start and all this stuff. Our location started in our house at Pinnacle Church, Dishman Hills, at the Edge in Cheney. That one started in our house. It was me and my wife and 2 kids, right?
Yeah.
So we already had a kids ministry right there. But when I was down south last week, I would talk to different pastors and people on staff and things. And they had so much going on, them telling me, and I was like, man, I'm exhausted just hearing about what you have going on. So this isn't original to me, but there's a story that whenever you ask this is what I thought about this guy that bought this drill bit company, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard this?
No, keep going.
This guy bought this drill bit company, and then he got everybody together, and the vice president, he gave a speech, and he talked about how good their drill bits were, how less return they had, and how they were so good and didn't break and all this. Well, the new owner gets up, and supposedly this is a real story, I don't know, but supposedly the new owner gets up and says, that was a good speech. But the reality is no one's in the market for drill bits. They're in the market for holes. And so the moment that somebody finds out how to get more holes, better holes, we're going to be out of business. So we don't need to focus on programs. We need to focus on people, because that's the goal. I don't think we're going to get to heaven and Jesus is going to say, I'm so glad for 30 years that y'all got the coffee right where it's supposed to be and the hot chocolate right where it's supposed to be every Sunday. I think he's going to care more about people than that, right?
Yeah.
And so there's kind of this switch that sometimes we have to step back and think, are we just focused on programs? Because even for us, it's easy. We get people all the time. Oh, we need a youth ministry. We need this. We need this. We need a men's thing. We need a women's thing. But our bandwidth isn't enough. But even if it was, do we want to do that? I'm not saying that they're a bad thing, but we always want to keep the focus on people rather than programs. Don't focus on the drill bit. Focus on the whole, right? Yeah.
So is the idea then, tying that in your kind of observation that these church leaders were so busy, meaning they've created all these programs, they've created all this need, they've created a machine that they now have to service, that they're so worried about that now they don't have time to invest in the people, in the relationships, And that stuff becomes overwhelming because they're so busy servicing the machine that they've created. I mean, is that that kind of your observation on that front?
Yeah. And one of the things that I know I did a really terrible job at down south was leading people to follow up with people, right? And so when we came up here, that's all we had to do, follow up with people. We didn't have anything.
Yeah.
But then, talking with people, even last week, and they have this discouraging look and feel. Their countenance is down, and they're like, I gotta worry about the Wednesday night meal. I have to worry about the Sunday school or small group stuff. And whenever I ask, hey, how do you follow up with people? And then the daunting answer is, well, I'm just a little too busy.
Yeah.
And we can get there too.
Yeah.
And we just gotta not do that. And so, if you're an established church, what it could be is bring in some leaders that you trust, elders, deacons, or even people that's not. I know the established church that I pastored in Arkansas that God let us do a lot in. What we did was we created a team. Hey, let this person be over this person be over this person be over this. And I just talked with people about it. Like, hey, would you want to do this? Like, you've been really involved in this men's ministry thing. Would you mind to be a contact for that? And they were like, no. Well, then I had the person doing the bulletin. I gave the program. I gave them names, and I said, here, print this up and print this in here. Let people know these are all the things. And then on Sunday morning, everybody was like, I don't know what's going on, but they knew me and they knew my heart. I moved too fast in that. But the cool thing is I've been away for almost 4 years and they're still doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, maybe another takeaway is when you have this multiplication in your DNA and that's how you approach ministry, like I think it gives you the ability maybe to step out and start some stuff. If you can start it with the idea of it's about multiplication, right? It's about giving other people opportunities. But if everything you're starting comes back and relies on you leading it and you implementing it and you like, that's a recipe for burnout. But this idea is if multiplication is at your DNA, now when you start things, it's only because it's maybe ability to give other people leadership and they can multiply as well. It's funny that you mentioned, and this is an observation I've had. I've been doing some, in the social media coaching and the marketing coaching for a number of years now. What's funny is the number of church leaders out there and I've had a hard time verbalizing this. What I mean by this is they actually probably don't want their social media and their marketing to work. So like and here's what I mean, is I teach them that social media is all about relationships. It's not just about publishing that scripture verse or that cool little theme. No, it's about the opportunity to develop relationships with people in their community. And I can coach them on how, hey, if you approach social media like this, you're going to start getting people conversing, messaging you, starting dialogue and conversation. Yeah. And then what happens is they start doing it, right? They start implementing. They're like, oh, wait, what do we do? All these people are commenting on our stuff and they're wanting to coffee and I don't have time for all this. And I'm like, well, that's the point. Like the whole point was you wanted to reach more people, but they don't realize that reaching more people and starting more relationships only leads to more and they don't want that. Like they wanted, so I have a hard time verbalizing what that is. And even the same thing about, we coach inside Church Marketing University, utilizing like text messaging and not utilizing it just as one-way blast, but how you use text messaging to start relationships. And again, I've had leaders do the same thing. Like this stuff actually works. Like people are texting me and like there's discipleship opportunities, but I'm too busy, right, to be able to do that. Like so I can't even verbalize it, what I mean by it right now, but sometimes as I'm thinking through this, like there are church leaders out there that don't want this stuff to work because it means more work. But I think it goes back to your point of that's the whole reason we're in this is those relationship opportunities. And if we've created something that makes us too busy for relationships, then what, kind of what have we done? So anyway, that's raw random Ryan thoughts, but so much good stuff here. And the last thing I wanted to run by you, get your thoughts on, and then I want to get back to Jonathan's stuff is this question, but this idea of the, and I have this one printed out here, and this will be on the article. You can see all my notes, but it's the leadership square. So it's kind of your process on how you coach people for this multiplication component of your leadership flow is this leadership square. So walk me real quick through the square.
And so one of the things in this is we want to teach people. A lot of times when it comes to volunteers, we're like, hey, can you do this? Well, then they go, and then we get frustrated because they don't do it. But then if we step back, we have to see how well did we lead them in this. So what this starts with is, all right, I'm going to do it, and you're going to watch.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to do it, you're going to watch. And so they don't do anything. They don't do any planning. They just show up, and then we do it, and this is how we do it. And then what we'll do right there, because some of our stuff changes so fast. And I thought I loved change until we started church. Right? It's so much. But then we'll take pictures of like the refreshment table or kids area stuff and things. So then we'll go from I do, you watch to I do and you help. And so then it's giving them the opportunity of, all right, you want to help with this? I think of a really good friend. His name is Rusty. I will give him the program stuff to put all together. It's got giving envelopes, new here cards, connection cards, everything all inside this program that everybody gets every Sunday with pins. And I will give him all the stuff all printed up. And then he will take it, and then he'll do it all together, and I don't have to worry with it. Like I helped, I did, and he was there. But then from that, he do, it's you do, I help. And so then you give them more of that leadership area, let them really be control of it, print off the stuff, you do that, and then we will help with that on Sunday. And then it's you do, I celebrate. And so then that's them finding, right after that, them finding somebody else to be able to multiply in that, to do what's been done to them. Yeah. And so we used to have all these job descriptions, and they were like 3 pages, and it was really good detail. Like, I'm surrounded with a really good team. And Stephen Ward in this, he will get the stuff, and he'll lay everything out and show everybody exactly everything, and it's really good. But a lot of times I'm just like, hey, do you want to do this? Great, bye. And so, and I always got to realize that we got to train people, and that's our job. So if I want people to do it, they got to see it as an example. And then we've seen a lot of success in that, and hopefully more.
Yeah, I love it. I do, you watch. I do, you help. You do, I help. You do, I celebrate, and then repeat. Yeah. So, and again, I'd go back to, for leaders doing an evaluation, like, how many leaders do you have in your ministry that have somebody in one of these steps, right? Because if all of your people would say, hey, there's nobody watching, or there's nobody helping, or there's nobody I'm helping, or there's nobody I'm celebrating, then we need to go back to square one and say, all right, guys, right, we're all going to find somebody. And I think this is a takeaway for me and some of my even volunteer roles at Summit Park Church is I want to be more intentional about being a multiplier myself, where sometimes I feel like because I'm involved in like the kids area, and sometimes I feel like I leave it up to, the kids director and stuff like that. But my takeaway is, man, how can I be more intentional about like the leadership square, and personally be more of a multiplier. So that's my takeaway with this as well. And
go ahead. We see a lot. I can tell you right now where people drop off in this.
Where is it?
And it's not the I do, you watch. It's not the I do, you help. They drop off with the you do, I help.
Gotcha.
There's that pivotal thing that once it gets past me doing it, and then once it gets to them doing it, what happens is there's a lot of discouragement, and maybe they didn't do things right, and they were discouraged with that. And, we have this thing in our mind that we think we're not good enough. We can't do this. The mission's too big. I'm not trained enough. But the thing is we got to coach them. And as leaders with volunteers, when it gets to the you do, I help, we have to be very patient. Like, we need to be prayed up. We need to be studied up. We need to be reminded that God forgives us from a lot more. So we need to help them. So if you can make that little turn, right, from the I do, you help. If we can make that little turn to you do, and then I help, then you're pretty much good.
I love it, man. That's a good word. All right, let's do this. Let's do a real quick. I think we got about 5 minutes here left, and thank you for spending this much time with us. But I want to do the speed round with all these questions. Okay, so I'm just going to go in here and give them just a good idea or thought, and then if you guys have any questions, throw them in here as well. We're going to do a speed round. But the first one, Jonathan's saying, I would love to know just briefly how to train people you send out to start churches. Not necessarily all detailed, but what's a big overview of, you were mentioning this family that went to Detroit. Did they go through any sort of formal training? Does that come through the Pinnacle Church Network? Real quick on that. Yeah,
so we have different areas where he went through classes that we have when it comes to preaching, communicating and things. But then also, by the time he left, he already wrote small group curriculum. He already led small group. He already did refreshments. His wife already did kids ministry. Is that still on?
You're blacked out. That's weird. We can still hear you, but your camera blacked out. All right, did the iPad lock up? Well, maybe he's going to rejoin us here, Jonathan. So he was in the middle of telling you. It sounds like they do have a somewhat of a formal training process, but it's also this idea of they've got he's gone through a lot. Yeah, you're back, man. Welcome back.
We got it.
So the idea is there is some sort of training process, but at the same time, he's gone through the real world experience. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. He went through all the real world stuff so that when he was sent out, he was able to go. Like, he didn't have to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And he didn't just do it. He trained other people before he was sent out, so that he already knew how to multiply. And we know disciples by their fruit, right?
Yeah.
And by the time he was sent out, he already led people to Jesus. He already wrote small group curriculum. He already led small group. He already got people serving in his different areas. His wife already did all these things too. And so that's kind of what we do.
Gotcha. Pastor Justin is asking, how are you bringing people from seeing the leaders being the example to being the leader? Is that the leadership square? Is that the idea of everybody's kind of taking on the multiplication and then going through the process with people?
Yeah, that's that, like, getting them to see that they have purpose and God has given them something that they can do better than I can. And so it's allowing them to be able to figure out their niche and then to go forward in that.
Love it. Luke is saying, sounds like you're talking about developing leaders, having your volunteers see themselves as leaders.
Yeah.
We've been having people read John Maxwell's book, Developing the Leader Within You. Sounds like a whole lot what you're talking about. It seems like I read that Maxwell book a while ago. I don't remember all the ins and outs of it, but I think that's a really important point, is not only are you helping people find their purpose and live that out, but then part of their purpose is that they're multiplying that process into other people. Yeah, and I think you even left a comment of, like, in one of the other videos or groups, is like, hey, when people find their purpose and live that out, part of their purpose is to go and do that for somebody else. Yeah. I can't remember if that was you or you've got another nugget on that front.
Yeah. And, man, when it comes to some leadership stuff, I don't always read stuff. So like, I've never read that book. And I know some people are like, you need to read that book. And my ADD is too bad to sit down and read a big book. Like, let's get straight to the point, right? But you know, there's a lot of good resources, and I know John Maxwell's a major leadership resource in that.
Yeah. Oh, hey Adam, what's up, man? Welcome to the show. There's
Slurpee Nation.
Slurpee Nation, I love it. That's awesome. How do you address volunteer conduct guidelines? I think this is maybe going back to the beginning of our conversation, because you guys were talking about, like, part of your church culture was, you know, you started with a homeless man that wasn't a believer as your drummer for your worship. So how do you allow people to come on board and belong before they behave? Is that, Chris, is that kind of what you're getting at there? I'm assuming that's kind of what he means.
So going back to that, you know, we got to realize if people aren't followers of Jesus, they're not going to behave, right? And so it's not that we're better than them. It's just that Jesus is doing a work in our heart. And so we got to make sure they belong. But then after they belong, then hopefully they'll believe. Prayerfully they'll believe. And then from there, it's discipleship and teaching them to walk and talk with Jesus, and part of that Great Commission. And so when it comes to guidelines, it is very fluid. And so there could be some things kind of like, well, maybe they don't know, right? So, like, I'll give you a real quick story. There's this guy who was serving in our church, and we had a mission team up from Arkansas, and they were up. And that Sunday, we talked about we talked about prayer, and then in small group we talked about that. And that mission team was inside my house, and this guy was in there, and he was exploring faith. And what we talked about was us talking with God, you know, and all that, like our dad. And well, he said, "Zach, can I pray?" And I was like, this is a huge step. And a lot of times we need to celebrate minute steps versus big steps. Yeah. And leaders, we need to have time to celebrate.
Yeah.
Don't just go past it. When somebody serves for the first time, say, "Hey, I'm so glad that you served." And write them a letter, and a little note, send it in the mail. But Jacob, he was praying, and then he cussed in his prayer, right? And he was like, he did that, and I like kind of looked up to see what the mission team was going to do, right? And when he got done, he said, "Was that good?" and like, as honest as can be, and I was like, "Jacob, that's probably one of the most honest prayers I've heard in a little while," you know?
Yeah.
And so from there, it was me getting with Jacob and saying, I know we said, talk to God like you normally talk. Don't talk in this archaic language, but do that. But maybe cussing might not be that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it would have been easy for me to get frustrated and say, "All right, you're never going to pray again," not out loud for a long time.
Man,
right?
That's so good. So I think a lot of this goes back to the messiness of multiplication discipleship. There's a tension there of being okay with that. That's hard, especially, again, coming, you know, probably from the Arkansas Midwest deal where everybody likes the clean. Hey, it's a clean box. We don't get messy around here. On one side, I'm tracking with you. I love it. I think we need to more lean that way. Let me ask you kind of a qualification question. Are there any areas like where there are guidelines, meaning, hey, if somebody is teaching a small group, if somebody is leading a kids Sunday school class, or they're volunteering in the kids ministry, where there's some like, hey, there's some hard and fast guidelines here, or if you guys say, hey, we're fluid all the way across the map?
No. So it looks like we're not professional, right? But underneath all this, there's structure. And so if somebody's speaking on stage, obviously they need to be a follower of Jesus. If somebody's singing on stage, they need to be a follower of Jesus. And I know we get a lot of kickback from different people. Oh, you shouldn't have people who aren't Christians to do things. Well, I come back and I know with this, it's not like, it's like, yeah, duh. But I'm like, well, I've never seen in the Bible where you can't have a lost person play drums in service, right?
Sure.
And so that's what I'm like. But if somebody's doing like speaking on stage, they need to be a follower of Jesus. Leading small group, they need to be a follower of Jesus. But from there, if it's hosting a small group, they don't have to be.
Gotcha.
It's like, what better mission field can we do besides go into somebody's house who's not a follower of Jesus?
Yeah.
And talk about the Bible, right? And so
sounds like what Jesus did.
Yeah, we have that. And it just blows my mind that God gives us these opportunities. But it was a tweak to change my mind. And that's what repentance is. Repentance is literally a good translation would be a change of mind.
Yeah.
And so God had to refine me in some of that, get outside of my Bible Belt thinking, and then think about multiplication. There's this lady, her name was Nicole, not my wife, but she wasn't a follower of Jesus. She loved kids. She loved to teach kids and things. So my wife got with Nicole and said, hey, how about you come with me and do this? Well, for 3 months, she served in the kids area. Well, then a couple weeks ago, we baptized her.
Wow.
And now it's like, okay, now we're going to switch. Now, look, this is what's crazy. She's already trained to teach a class.
Wow.
She's
been on that journey.
Yep. In less than a month, she's going to be teaching her own class.
Wow.
And so, because we always talk about multiplication, the girl that I said, remember a while back, talked about the girl that said we weren't professional, and that's how come she liked us. Well, because my wife was talking to her about multiplication, like it's our goal now as followers of Jesus to train other people. Well, Michaela said this. She said, ask my wife, when I film my baptism video, can I bring my friend? And she brought her friend, as she did her baptism video, then she brought her friend to her baptism that Sunday. Well, her friend, she prayed to receive Christ that day, and she's getting baptized next month. So we have brand new followers of Jesus within 2 weeks, pouring their life and trying to get their story about what God's done to them in front of their friends who aren't followers of Jesus. It's the wildest thing. I've never seen anything like it.
Dude, I love it. So much good stuff. I love all your stories, man. That just brings it home, just to hear the names and their journey, behind it. So good stuff. Matthew's asking, are there any books or materials your leaders are reading that help solidify the process? So obviously they're going on this journey. It's very much like discipleship, like taking leader through this process. So there's a lot of that ironing, sharpening iron, and multiplication happening. Are you also giving people like practical materials that are help supporting that?
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, and I know I talk slow anyway, but I'm going to say this slow. The best book that I've ever read, and it's actually a newer book, but Dave Ferguson wrote it. It's called Hero Maker. And
Hero Maker.
It is, I'm going to tell you, that is the best book about multiplication that I have ever read, outside of the Bible, of course.
Yeah.
But man, that one's good. Nelson Searcy has a lot of stuff, and we'll read that. 40X, 4 Disciplines of Execution, is a really amazing stuff, because we can have ideas, but if we don't execute it, what good is that? And Andy Stanley's 7 Practices of Effective Ministry, I mean, that's key in what we do.
Yeah, I love it. What's cool is, and hopefully those watching, what's cool is there's so much like this kind of raw and like we're doing this kind of messy journey and like this is really cool. But once you hear like underneath, like you've got dialed in like a lot of the systems and how you approach. So that's a cool like, it's kind of both sides of that spectrum happening, which I love to see. So man, really great recommendations there. I'll try to go back in the comments and link to those as well. I haven't read Hero Maker, so now I'm excited to go grab that one. So
you need to do it. Like that is so good.
It will be on order today. So man, this is a good question here. A really good question. So I know how to empower people to live their purpose, but how are you getting them to take the first step and want to be empowered? So thoughts on that? What would you say on that?
Yeah. So since it's our vision to multiply, we have to go back and think, well, if people aren't, is that vision really oozing out? Are people like, is that just a phrase that we say about multiplication, but they've never seen that? And we've had to step back at times and say, okay, we've kind of got, what's that? It's a saying in the South, too big for your britches, right? Yeah. And so at times we've had to step back and say, all right, we've got all these people serving, but now like there's very few that are actually multiplying. So let's step back and see where we kind of messed up so that we can tweak to go forward. And so a lot of times when it comes to discipleship, like if we're really honest, very few people have seen that. And so we stand up on Sundays or in small group, go and make disciples, go and share your story. Well, they've only heard the pastor do that. They haven't heard the guy doing the sound do that. They haven't heard the kids worker do that. The person making coffee, they haven't heard that. So a lot of times it's us sharing about what God did in our life to tweak so that we could see that it's not about us, it's all about Jesus. And stories help. If you can get one story with one name and share that, it's key.
Yeah, that's so good, man. Stories. And I would encourage you to go check out the leadership flow diagram that's in the article. You can find it on Church Marketing University, or Zach's got a blog where it's listed there as well. And we link to both on the Church Marketing University article. But it sounds like you guys have both a top-down approach, meaning the leadership is leading by example, you're sharing stories like crazy. And then there's that bottom-up approach where you've got the framework of outreach event, relationship, meeting them, getting to know them, that person inviting them to Sunday, getting them to a small group, and then inviting them to serve. So your DNA of your church is, this isn't just something that we kind of talk about from the stage or we have an announcement. This is something that we're all doing. So all of your people hopefully are going through that process where they're multiplying into other people. So when you ask, how do you get people to take that first step? A lot of that should be, or it looks like based on your flow, somebody else in the church is inviting somebody that they're in relationship to take that first step with them, right? So that's so you're doing top high level stuff, but then also your people are also saying, hey, will you come to my small group, right? They become the best personal invitation to get in their small group. Hey, will you come join me and hang out while we serve together on a Sunday, right? So if you can get your sound guy doing that, if you can get your drummer doing that, if you can get your kids teachers doing that, and you're doing it from the top down as well, you're setting the culture and the stage. Like that seems to be your kind of magic sauce. Is that?
Yeah, that's good. And a really good leader is Keith Weezer, and he started Resonate Church. It's a collegiate church plant. They are doing one of the best jobs in the Northwest that I've ever seen. But he said this, he shared some insight, and he said he tells his people today on staff, today is your last day of doing ministry. This is your funeral in ministry. And now your job is to train other people to do it.
Yeah.
Like you do it. 2 Timothy 2:2, train godly men who will go and do the same. Teach everybody to observe everything Jesus said, the Great Commission, and like go and do that. And so I think a lot of times we focus on being doers versus multipliers. And that's what that book, Hero Maker, talks about.
Gotcha. Man, good stuff. I think we're going to sell some copies of Hero Maker.
Good.
Chris is asking, and I think we answered this a little bit. I think what you expect from somebody who is representing the church. I like to stick to the side of grace, but was wondering how you handle that. I think you talked a little bit about that, like certain positions or certain roles, if they are representing God's word, if they're leading, if at a high level, then it's a different kind of person that you're looking for, as opposed to somebody who's going on the journey in your DNA of being okay with them exploring faith. Anything else you want to say to Chris?
And so we're in Spokane. Spokane loves to do big stuff. So like in a couple weeks, we have a race called Bloomsday, and it's over 45,000 people in this race. And so we don't do church at our normal location. We go and serve water at a water station. And so we tell people that aren't in some sort of leadership role, if they're not a small group leader or things like that, if you're there and the media comes, like come find somebody with a lanyard, like let them talk to them. But sometimes that don't always happen, right? Like last year, we had some people who are on the fringe of being in leadership in one of our locations, and the news came to them, and they're just really crazy, don't have a church background really at all. And the news, we get recognized a lot for serving in the community. And the news came up to them and was asking them questions. They're like, hey, we're on Facebook Live, over 45,000 people in this race and all this. And the guy says, what's Facebook? And it's like, we got all the news and this is what you did.
No.
And so it's like, all right, next time, let's not do that. So grace, like a good definition for grace. I know grace is just thrown out there. Grace isn't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl, right? But grace is God giving us what we don't deserve. And so if we take that and give it to people, maybe that helps. But it's also, we have this accountability that we need to do right in the world. So sometimes we always let people know. It goes back to the three things that we say: explore faith, experience community, expand mission. And so we always ingrain in people, they hear it every Sunday, all right, now go and do the same. And so hopefully our people are reminded of that. That doesn't always happen. Like when we first started, we gave T-shirts away. I mean, thousands of T-shirts, right? And then this was at the Edge in Cheney, and somebody texted me and said, hey, on the news, a guy got arrested with your T-shirt on. And it's like, well, he may go or he may not. I don't know, right? But it's always trying to be gracious and realizing, man, anything that's normally done can be undone. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, we say it all the time at Summit Park that we are not a perfect church, and we're a church for imperfect people, chasing after a perfect God. And I think sometimes if your church gets a reputation that it's okay for not perfect people to come. Yeah, and it's okay for not perfect people to go on the journey, because I think a lot of people sit on the sidelines because they're like, hey, I'm not perfect. So what good am I to be volunteering and or engaged because I've got issues, right? And that keeps people from going on that journey. So, man, that's funny. I love that idea. Like you there's the messiness. There's definitely messiness there when it comes to that, and just being, grace filled and going through that with wisdom. I know it's not easy. It's not cookie cutter, but it's a powerful when you're willing to step into the mess. So, John's saying here kind of a really cool story that his dad was asked to be an usher before he was saved. Our pastor at the time knew he was not saved, but wanted him to be in church. 4 weeks later, my father and mother both received Jesus at the same time. Thank God for allowing the unsaved to serve. So cool.
And so like in that, it not only affected his dad, but that's John being a follower of Jesus. You know, like that is amazing. And it's just a small act of kindness and letting people kind of find their purpose. Like with me, I know my story. I never knew my dad. I still don't know my biological father. My mom was in drugs, committed suicide when I was 13. I felt like there was no purpose. Like God made a mistake, but that's not the case. And so people finding purpose, like, man, be an usher. And we can, it's easy for us to think that's no big deal, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. Not only for him, but for generations to come, you know, the impact of that. And man, that's just another great story when you're willing to step in and go on a journey with people. You know, what God calls us to do, the power of that. And what's cool too is I think one thing I don't want people to miss out is the multiplying impact when you go on a journey with people who are in mess. And when God starts to work in their heart, guess what? They have a lot of friends who are also not in church, not on that journey. And that's where you get your natural, like, people bringing other people who are going through life, you know, together, like you said, that baptism story. And so sometimes it just starts with that first story. And then if that is where you get the multiplication impact. And again, that leads to multiplication, also leads to a whole bunch more mess, but that's what we're called to do.
Yeah. So like, check this out. That baptism story, Michaela brought her friend to her baptism video, then brought her to church. She gets saved. Well, now, when she's going to get baptized next month, Michaela, who was baptized this month, she's going to help set up all the baptism stuff. And so next month, those people are going to set up the baptism stuff for the next month. And so that's kind of what we do.
Wow, dude. So cool. So many good ideas in there. And I think, again, one of the huge takeaways I hope people are hearing is, yes, there's some short-term strategy stuff that you can do to get more volunteers. And I think that's kind of what, as all pastors and church leaders, like, we got to have those more volunteers. But there's a bigger thing culture-wise that's going on that Zach's talking about, that it starts with your church making a commitment to being a multiplying church, a discipling church, multiplying people, and going on that journey with people. When you do that, multiplication becomes a part of your DNA. And now you're on a whole different journey than we need 2 more volunteers this week, right? So go ahead.
One of the best things is people, you know, I was down for a week. I mean, spoke to over 14 different church representatives and things. And everybody, the cool thing is everybody think that I have a lot going on and that I have it together. What they don't know is I just have a good team around me. Right?
Yeah. So good, Dan. Team makes a big impact. We'll end this here with Jeff's comment, War Eagle. And so
they beat Alabama last year. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. I grew up in Oklahoma, Zach, so I'm a Boomer Sooner fan. You're like, I'm sorry. I've got to end this now, but. Man, we're pretty pumped. Oklahoma, always seems like we got a good team, but
Bosworth,
Brian Bosworth. Yeah, out of all the people, you go back to Brian Bosworth. Man. He was awesome. Jamel Holloway, the quarterback that ran the option, was always my hero growing up. I think he got arrested for drug dealing, unfortunately, a little bit later on. But you need to get him in. I don't know where Jamel is, but anyway, we could talk. Let's do another episode just on college football, maybe coming into this. Into this fall, we could talk about that. That'd be fun. Yeah. But man, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about you, your church, your blog. Like you said, you're all like a self-supported missionary. So even if people want to give to what you've got going on, I know that would bless you on a Wednesday. How can people get connected with you, find out more, read more of your articles, and maybe also give to your ministry?
Yeah, so they can go to zacminton.com, ZACMINTON.com, or pinnaclechurch.com, and they can check it out. But then from there, if people want to support what we're doing, they can always come out on mission. We have the Bloomsday that's coming up, or we're really praying for about 60 people to come on mission the end of June. It's for Hoop Fest. It's the world's biggest 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and people fly up, and we will keep them inside one of our locations or in a hotel room, and then they will help us. We're the only church that they let be down there, and we're going to serve in 5 different areas. It'll be a 2-day thing. Over 225,000 people will be there. So people can come up on mission there, or if they want to give, pinnaclechurch.com/give. And then if you want to give to staff, you can give to whoever there, and we would like for you to partner with us.
So at Pinnacle Church, can we designate money to go to support you?
Yeah.
It's like a little drop down or something?
Yep. All you got to do is when it says choose campus, choose give to staff, and then they can give to us. So my wife and I, we've just prayed about this, and this is how we've done it. And every month we've prayed for people to financially give, and whether it's $5, $10, $100, and we've always survived for almost 4 years, which is amazing.
Very cool, man. Well, I've loved picking your brain. I loved hearing your stories. I loved getting a chance to get to know you more. Thank you for pouring into our audience, Social Church, Church Marketers, Church Marketing University. It's always refreshing when we kind of go back to the basics and talk about a lot of these culture things. Man, I'm encouraged today. I'm fired up. I'm pumped up personally to go and be more of a multiplier in my own life and ministry. So thank you so much for doing that. As soon as I get off here, I'm headed over to Pinnacle Church to be a part of your ministry as well, sending you a gift. I'd encourage you guys to do the same. I mean, he's taken quite a bit of time here, so it was always awesome. There's always a reward when you find somebody else a part of the kingdom, growing the kingdom, and you go and bless them as well. So I'll put a link as well. Cool. And man, just thank you so much. A lot of people saying thank you so much. They'll be praying for you. Man, it's so cool. We need hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of more Zacs out there planting churches, multiplying, for our country, for our world. So keep up the good work, man. It's been a joy.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
All right. God bless. We'll see you.